What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We're coming to you after another day of practice for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this time we got a little bit more insight when it comes to the one player that the Cavs have been waiting to see, Max Strus. He was there, he was getting in a rigorous workout after practice, which he was a full participant for. And Chris, when it comes to the potential for him to be ready to play in his first game of the season against the Milwaukee Bucks on Friday night, what do you think the likelihood of that is?
I think it's better than 50-50, Ethan, but trying to classify it anything more than that, I think is just really, really difficult to do. I think it's a fool's errand. These things are so fluid. These things are tricky. And everything is about how his ankle is going to respond to the increased activity. Clearly, what he did today, everything that we saw after practice, that was the most activity that he has done since coming back. It was good for him, I think, to have a full practice, participate in that, and still feel okay to go through an individual workout afterward and be one of the last people to leave the floor today. I think that's a good sign that shows that he feels like his ankle can handle a little bit more and more each day. The running that he was doing from baseline to baseline, the cutting that he was doing coming off of simulated screens, the shooting that he was doing, the jump shooting that he was doing, all that kind of stuff is a positive sign. But trying to predict how his ankle is going to feel tomorrow when he wakes up, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do that. I'm not sure how the Cavs are supposed to do that, right? So I think Max clearly wants to play, and I think the Cavs are optimistic that he will be able to play on Friday. I think they're hopeful that he's going to be able to play Friday. They were hopeful that he was going to be ready last week. Max was hopeful that he was going to be ready last week. But it's all about how his ankle responds, and the Cavs have told Max from the very beginning, look, if you're just not 100% right, if you don't feel like you're ready to go, if you don't feel like you're ramped up enough, don't push this. There's no need to push this. And Kenny Atkinson has told him the same thing as well. So I think it all depends on how Max feels, how that ankle responds. The Cavs are going to practice again on Thursday. And if he's able to practice after what he was able to do today, I think that's going to be a good sign too. And then if he's able to go through shoot around on Friday before the Bucks game, that's going to be a good sign too. But as much as I think he's hopeful, as much as I think the Cavs are hopeful, and they believe that he is going to be ready, that this extended time off that the schedule allowed was very, very beneficial for him. There could be something that pops up one morning where his ankle just doesn't feel right enough to give it a go. But everything that I have heard, everything that I've gathered to this point, everything that I've seen to this point, I would say it's better than 50-50 that he makes his debut on Friday.
And I think how he was operating today not only showcased how much he wanted to be back, like he was, like you mentioned, Chris, doing the baseline to baseline running, sprinting, and then coming back and getting into a shot profile that looks very similar to the one that Kenny Atkinson wants to be using in his system, getting up and down to the baseline, but getting to the corners or getting to the wing and creating offense. And then as Kenny Atkinson was going through his his practice interview with the media, Max Strus was doing like an around the world kind of shooting, and he was taking one shot in every different spot, running to each position, and then doing a whole lot of different things, especially as you mentioned, the cutting. And as we mentioned, talking to Kenny Atkinson post practice, he said that he was a full participant. He said he looked good. He said that they were awfully close to getting Max Strus back and how excited he was to do that. But he's talked about how excited he was to have Max Strus in his offense since he got here. And I think Max is a picture-perfect fit for the kind of system that Kenny Atkinson has been wanting to run and has been running and has led to this 23-4 start, a historic start as well to the season for the Cavs. Unfortunately, go ahead, Chris.
No, nothing. I mean, I just think, the questions that we were asking Kenny pertaining to Max, the way that he was responding, the way that he's responded for the last week, are all very, very positive, and they speak to a guy who's going to have a big role within this offense and within this defense. The things that they like about Max, they don't get from the other guys on this roster. He's different. He's a different stylistic player than Isaac and than Dean and even Sam Merrill. They're very similar, Max and Sam, but they're also different. Like Max has more of an ability to be a playmaker. Max has more of ability to put it on the deck and score at the rim. Max has more of an ability to run a two-man game with Evan Mobley or Jared Allen. You know what I mean? It's just a different kind of level. So there are similarities to the style that Sam plays and the style that Max plays. But Max is just different than anybody on this roster, and they need the things that he brings to the table. And I just think he brings the starting lineup together. I think he brings this team together and makes it make more sense, especially on the offensive end of the floor. And there's a lot of excitement, not just from Kenny, but other members of the coaching staff and members of the front office about what all of this is going to look like when Max comes back. And you just feel that every time Kenny talks about Max.
And my favorite thing about the option of having Max Strus back is that there it creates more options off the bench, right? It creates more
Mhm.
matchups and lineups that Kenny Atkinson can go to based on whoever they're playing, right? Because what the Cavs like about Max is he is shown to be able to stand his ground as a true small forward, but he also has shown himself on the defensive end, and he's shown himself as a great offensive player when it comes to net rating, when it comes to offensive rating, all those different things. And then you go to the bench and you're like, oh, we might need more point of attack defense. Here you go, Isaac Okoro. You might need some
Mhm.
more paint defense. Okay, here's Dean Wade. You might
Mhm.
need some more ball handling and playmaking and whatever. Here's Karis LeVert. And I think the options that the Cavs can go to off the bench with Max Strus as the starter or the projected starter to start the season. I'm not saying he's going to come back and start as soon as he gets back, especially because he might be on a minute restriction. But he
No, 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 no.
was
He will. He will be on a minute restriction. I can tell you that much. It is going to be somewhere between 18 and 22 minutes because they are not going to bring him back and say, you know what, we were cautious this entire time for these 8 weeks. Go in there and play 30 minutes a night. Nope, nope, nope. Not going to happen. It's going to be 18 to 22. It's going to be a strict one. It's going to be head trainer Steve Spiro watching it. It's going to be president of basketball operations, Kobe Altman, watching it like a hawk. And, there's going to be some kind of, I mean, this is me being facetious, but there's going to be some kind of buzzer that is around the palm of Kenny Atkinson or something like that when he passes the workload for Max Strus on a given night where that thing goes off and he's got to get him out of the game because again they do not want any kind of setback. They don't want a situation where they put him back in the lineup, he feels good enough to play, and then something flares up or something, or they push it too hard. So he is going to be on a minute restriction. It's going to be around 18 to 22 minutes, and there's about a 98.2%, I just made that up, a 98.2% chance that he comes off the bench.
right, and I was about to get into that because we don't like to make assumptions based on jersey colors or anything like that. But today he was not wearing a wine color penny when it comes to what the Cavs usually wear for the starters when they're practicing. He was wearing
You know who
the
else wasn't wearing that color?
who?
Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, exactly.
Sixth man of the year, Donovan Mitchell. No, completely kidding. They mix and match throughout the course of practice. Um, so yes, I think that's a good observation by you, and I think that's a logical observation. But Donovan Mitchell was also wearing a non-wine colored jersey today, which I thought was hilarious.
So
Maybe
again,
he spilled some body armor or something like that on the front of the wine colored one, and he had needed to flip it inside out. Or maybe They split up the teams for their penalty kick shootout, soccer style. So he needed to wear a non-wine colored one. But Donovan in something other than wine was just really, really funny because you don't see that very often.
Right, and I think it was interesting. You mentioned the soccer shootout. We walked in, and Donovan Mitchell was giving rookie Jalen Tyson the business, showcasing his strong foot acumen, all those different things. And it's interesting to think about how often and the likelihood of this Cavs team doing something different that isn't basketball related and how they can
Mm.
still turn that into a basketball lesson or anything like that. And to my count, Chris, the Cavs have now done pickleball, football, dodgeball,
Yeah,
soccer, like almost every sport, wiffle ball, almost
yeah,
every sport you can mention, they've done it. And we talked a little bit to Jared Allen after practice today about getting the guards now as the Cavs continue to up their switchability and all those different things, especially preparing for teams like the New York Knicks and the Boston Celtics and those teams down the line. And maybe Donovan was in on the opposing team to give Jared Allen the opportunity to guard him and get a different look when it comes to guarding one of the best players in the league.
I'll say this when it comes to the whole Max situation. Um, the other thing to add is that like what was going to be so complicated about that, or quote unquote complicated about that for somebody like Kenny Atkinson. And he's talked about this, Ethan. It's a good problem to have, but it means he has decisions to make with his roster, with his rotations, with his lineups, whose minutes are going to get trimmed, right? What guy are going to be consistently in the 8 to 9 man, and then who's 10 and 11 that's kind of like on the edge, that's maybe one night going to get 30, the next night going to get 12. You know what I mean? Um, that decision, it feels like, is about to be taken out of his hands. And Kenny kind of hinted at it earlier today. I asked him point blank, I said, how comfortable are you playing 11 consistently nightly? Because you're about to get into that situation. And he said, well, something along the lines of, we haven't gotten to that point yet. Every time we have felt that we were going to get to that point, something has happened, an injury, an illness, somebody out of the lineup for some kind of reason. And he was hinting at the situation with Isaac Okoro. I've been around long enough that that's exactly what he was doing. And he said, we're going to cross that bridge when we get to it. Let us get 11 first, and then we can talk about that. And that pointed to a guy who was planning to not have Isaac Okoro this weekend and not have to make that 11-man rotation type of decision. So the quote unquote complication that comes with Max coming back, and how are the Cavs going to get all of these minutes for all of these guys who deserve it, who have earned it throughout the course of this year. It's not going to be an immediate issue, number one, because Max is going to be on a minute restriction. Number two, because he is most likely going to come off the bench. And number three, from everything that I hear, the Cavs are bracing for a multi-game or maybe even a multi-week absence from Isaac Okoro. Did not practice today. Probably not going to practice tomorrow, Thursday. Would not expect him to play on Friday against the Bucks. Would not expect him to play the next game after that. It may be, this is a day-to-day thing from what I understand, but the term sprain has been used since the night of the Brooklyn game, number one. And number two, like in talking to people earlier today, weeks was something that was brought up as a possibility. Not that it's going to be that way, but as a possibility, because one thing we know, they're going to be cautious. That's how they operate. And the other thing that we know is that those kinds of hits that a guy can take when fighting through a screen, and the way that Isaac, one of the toughest dudes in this locker room, reacted to that hit, and the way that he was talking with his teammates after the game in Brooklyn, it pointed to something, again, not being concerning, but something being off with his shoulder. and I would expect an actual update, an actual timeline, if not later tonight, tomorrow from the Cavs, maybe even Friday from the Cavs. But like I said, they're bracing for a multiple game, maybe even a multiple week absence for somebody like Isaac, even though I bet a majority of the time Kenny is going to continue to classify it as day to day because that's just how he operates as a coach.
And he did say, to be very frank, at the very beginning of answering Chris's first question of playing 11, he said, "We will play 11." He was very frank about that. But he also did mention, and Kenny's wording sometimes you just gotta pay attention. And
Yeah,
also he did mention that he didn't feel like it would be a long term thing. And I
right,
think for
right.
Kenny, long term means month to month rather than
Yeah.
week to week or day to day. And that's just us picking up on things as we
Mhm.
continue to learn more about Kenny Atkinson in his first season in Cleveland. But I think the most important thing for Isaac is you could tell that it wasn't the same kind of injury that Donovan Mitchell sustained a couple weeks ago or a week ago when it came to the Washington Wizards game against Jonas Valanciunas when he ran into that screen. That one looked like a stinger, right? Because he held his arm and he like felt like he couldn't feel it. Isaac felt it, went back to the locker room, all those different things, and then came back and was able to make a three, catch the ball up high. So for fans that are asking, like, why didn't they take more precaution when it happened? All these different things. We continue to talk about and harp on the fact that it is about how these players react to injuries that they sustain. It's how they
Hmm.
react to things that go on in games. You're not always going to be able to tell in the first 12 to 24 hours
Yeah.
how an injury could impact the player, especially when it's a shoulder injury and you need more imaging on those kinds of things to get back. Donovan Mitchell, Isaac Okoro, injuries, not
Hmm.
the same. Players, not the same. Running into Jonas Valanciunas and versus Ben Simmons, two different things. Also, the fact that angles play a lot of roles when it comes to running through screens and running around screens. And we know Isaac Okoro to run through screens. This isn't a player, or this isn't, in comparison to Donovan Mitchell, where he's like, I could have decided not to run through Jonas Valanciunas. Isaac was going to try and run through the screen. It
Yeah.
didn't matter who it was. That's how he has got his reputation as a defender. And I think the Cavs are going to miss him if he does not play the most on Friday against the Milwaukee Bucks, especially when it comes to guarding Damian Lillard, who's been on a heater, coming off winning the NBA Cup. And just to give some stats on that before we go into the last topic, with Isaac as the nearest defender over 2 games this season against Damian Lillard, he's had 14 minutes of matchup data. He's allowed just 13 points on 3 of 10 shooting from the field, 1 of 6 from 3 point range, and he's committed 4 turnovers in that span. So when you talk about how Isaac has been able to defend Damian Lillard, we've gone back. You can look back at the numbers last year, and it's even worse for Dame over a longer period. So I think it's important to look at that matchup and whoever gets that task. Obviously, you look to Karis LeVert, who got a lot of praise today after practice for his defensive acumen and all those different things. But Chris, when it comes to Isaac and his injury, and then also looking ahead, what do you think is the most important thing to monitor for this situation?
I don't know that there is anything. I think it's just how does he recover? How does his body feel? Um, can he be effective playing through that particular injury? I think those are things that stand out to me because, the style of player that he is, it's about toughness, it's about contact, it's about competitiveness, it's about aggressiveness. So, like, can he do the things that make him the kind of player that he is for this team, right? Because he's not somebody who's just going to stand out there on the perimeter and wait for the basketball to come to him and just dribble around out there and take a bunch of jump shots or something like that. He's going to be around the rim. He's going to be in the paint. He's going to be finishing through contact. He's going to be cutting to the basket through a bunch of different defenders. He's going to be setting screens for Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. He's going to be on the defensive end running through those screens and chasing dudes around screens. If it were Damian Lillard, think about how many times Dame runs around screens and how often whoever is defending him is going to take contact just by chasing him around the court because of the number of screens that are set for him. So it's all those things I think are worth monitoring. And I think those are the things that the Cavs are going to strongly consider. Like, can he play through it? Probably. He's Isaac. He's one of the toughest dudes in this locker room and in the NBA. But can he be the kind of player that he needs to be for this team with this particular injury? I think that's a question. I think that's part of the thing that's going on with Max. If you think about Max and the kind of player he is, the cutting, the sharp movements, running from baseline to baseline, running around all these screens, all these different chasing dudes around screens because of the position that he plays and because of the guys that he guards, all those different things are really, really difficult to do when you're dealing with an ankle issue, right? And it was a severe ankle sprain from the very beginning. He was in a boot for like 2 weeks. That's a long time to be in a walking boot. And that tells you the severity of that particular injury. And I think part of the reason why you see them being so cautious is because the style that he plays and the stress that he puts on his ankle every single possession, every single night. And his ankle has to be physically ready for that. And he mentally has to be ready to play through that kind of pain or something along those lines. So I think it's the same thing with Isaac. Yeah, it's one thing to be healthy enough to just go out there and play and gut through it and do what you can. But can you be effective and do the things that the team needs you to do that make you the kind of player that you are with this particular injury? And I think for Isaac, again, I don't know the exact nature of the injury. I've heard multiple different things. I've heard multiple different characterizations of it. So I'm going to wait for a little bit more clarity. But it feels like the kind of player he is, and this particular injury is one that him being the style of defender that he is one that's not the easiest to play through.
And I think it's the thing that I'm going to be monitoring most is not necessarily the injury itself, is obviously when he comes back from the injury, because you talk about a guy that has worked so hard to get to the shooting acumen that he's displayed this season. 49.2% from 3-point range, Chris. The man is shooting almost 50% from three. And then you have a shoulder injury, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's to his shooting shoulder. And I think that is the most important thing. Obviously, he's a great defender. He will be able to defend at the point of attack. Obviously, we'll have to be more precarious when it comes to those screens and running through them when he comes back. But how does he have that same lift in his arm? Does he get the same kind of arc on his shots? And what does that look like when he returns? Because if his shot is flat, how long will it take for his shot to feel natural again? Because depending on the severity of the injury, which we are still waiting to classify, I think it could impact not only his just his shot in general, but also his confidence. Because we talk about how important that is for a guy like Isaac, who's come into the season ablazing and shooting a hot number, and it feels like he was on the rise and continuing to earn respect, which created more options and difficulties for opposing defenses when it comes to the Cavs' offensive attack. So I think that's something to monitor as well. And I think You talk about Max Strus's ankle. I think it's interesting that Sam Merrill had to have surgery on a kind of similar situation earlier into
Yeah.
his career. I wonder how Max might be talking with Sam on his recovery process, might be trying to pick his brain on how he's managed that injury over his career, because Sam still deals with that to this day. We've seen it over this season, last season. There's always going to be, if you ask Sam, some kind of thing going on with his ankle. It's just about playing through it to the capability of running around screens, running up and down the floor. And for Sam, specifically this season, taking more of a defensive task, as he's one of the best defensive rated players on the
Yep.
Cavaliers.
I mean, I think that's a good point that you bring up in terms of Isaac and playing through that shoulder injury, and does it have a carryover effect when he gets back into the lineup, and do his mechanics slightly change because of soreness, because of pain, or something like that? Definitely have to monitor that. I think there's another layer to it too, Ethan, is um, at the time that Isaac comes back, is Max ready to have his minute restriction lifted? Is he ready to go back in the starting lineup, or does Isaac go back in the starting lineup? Does Kenny Atkinson stay with Dean Wade if Dean's the one who's going to slide in the starting lineup Friday if Isaac can't play against the Bucks, which is more than likely what's going to happen? It's more than likely going to be Dean because of all the different things that we've seen and talked about from Dean this year. But if you think about it, at the very beginning of the year, it was Dean. It was Dean until it wasn't. And Dean stepped away from the team for, two straight games because he was feeling less than 100%. He was dealing with an illness, flu-like symptoms. He never regained that starting spot back. So Kenny has shown a willingness to kind of go with what he thinks is best, what he thinks is working at the time. So, for somebody like Isaac, who's been so good and so effective in this quasi starting role, filling in for Max Strus and, taking the job from Dean Wade, does Dean play well enough in the potential absence of Isaac, if he is going to miss games, to the point where he's going to hang on to that starting spot until Max is ready to reclaim it and have his minute restriction lifted? Or does Dean not capitalize on the opportunity, and then when Isaac is back, healthy and effective, he goes back into the starting lineup? And if it's at a time when Max's minute restriction is lifted and he's ready to be the starter again, what does that mean for Isaac's minutes? Is he then all of a sudden behind Max and Dean on the depth chart? Is he in between Max and Dean on the depth chart? You know what I mean? Like, those are things that I think are going to be really, really interesting to monitor, because as we said, if you're going to play 11, it's not going to be 11 high minute guys. You can play Donovan 30 plus. You can play Jarrett 30 plus, and Evan and Darius and those guys. But, you can't play Karras 30 plus if you're going to play 11. You certainly can't play Ty Jerome 30 plus. It's not like he is right now, but you can't. You just can't. You can't play everybody, 25 to 30 minutes a night. So, like, who's the guy who's going to be in the teens in terms of workload? And how is that going to sit with that particular player? All those different things, I think, are really, really interesting to monitor. And like I said, initially, I think it's going to be taken out of the hands of Kenny, because I do not expect Isaac to play this weekend. I'd be very surprised if he does play this weekend. But eventually, those decisions are going to have to come. And, like, if a guy is coming off an injury and he's not fully effective, or he hasn't been there for a week or a week and a half, like, what does that mean for his workload? Because it's clear, since Dean came back, came off the injury, like, the usage of Dean has been very, very different. In part because Isaac just played so well during that stretch. And Kenny has shown that he's going to ride the hot hand, and he's going to stick with what he believes is best for the team and what he believes is working. So it's not like Dean has been out of sight, out of mind. And I don't think Isaac's going to get to a point where he's out of sight, out of mind. He's done enough. But, like, it's easier to take minutes from the guy who's just working his way back in. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes that's the easiest solution. And does that happen to Isaac if he misses time
Yep.
and when he comes back?
And I think it's interesting because we talk about all of the different nuances of a shoulder injury. And I think it's also interesting to think about how it could impact running and all those different things because you use your shoulder so much more than I think people recognize. And I think that's something to keep in mind when it comes to his recovery process, the length of it, and whatever timeline we receive from the Cavs organization. And the before I get into the last question I wanted to ask you, like Max Strus still hasn't been cleared.
Right.
Like we haven't, even after his 6 week reevaluation, we have not gotten an official update from anybody on Max Strus's return or whatever it may be. So until until we get that little press release from Cavs PR or the Cavs organization saying that Max is officially back, everything is speculation and based on what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and obviously Chris Fedor reporting for you all. So the last thing that I wanted to ask you about, Chris, pertains to the injuries of not physical, but more illness related. I know you said you were going to keep your eye on this as it was kind of a bug that had been circulating throughout the Cavs locker room. And over the last couple of weeks, it has been Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, and other guys as well. Dean Wade, as we mentioned earlier into the season, was kind of the beginning piece to this illness bug trickulating its way through the
Across the
Cavs locker
NBA,
room.
really.
Have you heard? Yeah. So, have you heard anything about this bug that's been kind of making its way through? And what is it? Is it a lung thing, or is it something that fans should be worried about?
No, I don't think so. It feels like flu-like symptoms, chest type stuff. Look, Chris Middleton missed the NBA Cup championship game because of an illness. Najee Marshall for the Dallas Mavericks has missed some time recently because of this illness. There was somebody else that popped up on the injury report recently that missed games because of this illness. So it's clear that it's going around the NBA. I don't know. It's probably just December. That's what happens when you get into December. That's what happens when you have kids too. That's the other thing. They go to these daycares are surrounded by these snot lockers, and then they contract whatever it is that those kids have and they bring it home to their parents and stuff like that. Like I'm living that right now. Like every time Elliot gets sick, every time he goes to school and he comes back with something, we do all the hand sanitizer that we can. We wash his hands diligently. We do all these different things to prevent it, but kids get sick all the time. And so I know part of that was that's what Dean was dealing with. He has a kid. I know around the NBA, other guys have kids too, and they get sick from their kids. And like I said, every time Elliot gets sick, like my wife is now sick, and then I have to stay away from her. I have to try not to hug her. All those kinds of things, like stay away, go sleep in the other room, stuff like that, because I don't want to get what you have and what Elliot had, and I don't want it to make its way around the house, and then it's a vicious circle for all of us, and we're all affected by it. So I don't know. It just feels like the timing of this is more what usually happens in December um, with these illnesses around the NBA. It feels like it's kind of made its way through the Cavs and done with the Cavs, but if they play against a team, Milwaukee, I just brought up Chris Middleton for a reason. Like if they play against a team like Milwaukee that's got a couple of guys dealing with it, and then they're close contact with them and they're guarding them, that's like almost unavoidable. So it feels like it's not as much of a deal as what it was. And when the Cavs were getting X-rays from the medical staff and stuff like that to see if there was anything in the lungs, anything in the upper respiratory area, whatever the case may be, it feels like it's made its way through and they're done with that. But I'm going to be interested to see, what happens following the Milwaukee game. Is Middleton going to play? If he does play, is he contagious? I don't know. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with when it comes to life in the NBA and just life in general, especially this time of year. Everybody gets sick at this time of year, right? Like if you go to Giant Eagle, or as Elliot likes to call it, Giant Eagles, if you go to any of these places, the shelves are like sold out of Robitussin and sold out of like Zicam and all these different things. So I think the Cavs are good with it. I think it's made its way through, and they're not as worried about it. But I guess we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Giant Eagle today
So was I.
for a season of giving. Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
well, I was there for a seasons of giving event for Darius
yep.
Garland, Jalen Tyson. They were giving back to the community. I was unfortunately not one of those lucky individuals that got his groceries or paid for. But they gave up groceries for the holiday season, and you could see like they were very interactive with the community. They were hugging, handshakes, all these different things. But then they would come back, and as the entire thing was over, they would apply hand sanitizer and trying to disinfect and all these different things because it is the holiday season, but it is the season of colds and sickness and all these different things. And we'll get more into Chris Middleton and the Milwaukee Bucks on tomorrow's podcast as we preview that game, as well as the Hey Chris episode as well for this week. But I definitely think it's something to monitor when it comes to the illness that's going around, especially with Chris Middleton, who I believe was probable going into the NBA Cup championship game and then did not play in that game. So that shows you how
Yeah.
things can change on the drop of a hat and all those different things. So something to talk
Yep.
about
So
in a different podcast, but not so much today.
yeah, and you brought up grocery shopping. I have to get into this. Um, so you know how back in the day, like there were always these things that you enjoyed as a kid, um, and then like your taste buds evolve and you're exposed to different kinds of things. So I'm in the grocery store today, Ethan, and I'm going up and down the aisles with Elliot, and we're looking for various things to bring to his Christmas showcase on Friday that he's doing with his school. And I walk down one of the aisles that has a bunch of juice boxes and stuff like that. And Capri Sun is still hot. Kids still love Capri Sun. They love Kool-Aid jammers and stuff like that. But I don't know if you're old enough to remember it. Maybe you are. Do you remember Sunny Delight?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sunny
Yeah.
D. Sunny
Yeah, it's now
D.
called Sunny D. So I'm going up and down the aisles and I see Sunny D. I don't know why Elliot was playing around with some of the juice boxes and it just drew my attention to the Sunny D. So I come home from the grocery store. Holly hates sending me to the grocery store because there's no telling what I'm going to come home with and whether we actually need these things that I come home with. So she goes through, she grabs the receipt, number one, and then she goes through the bags and she's like, "What is this? Like, I don't like orange juice." And I said, "Babe, that is not orange juice. That is Sunny D. Okay. Thank you very much. I grew up on that stuff. But I had one tonight. It it doesn't taste nearly as good as what I remembered when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I used to scarf that stuff. I used to chug that stuff. But I tried it tonight and it's like the novelty of what it was, like maybe because when you're a kid that was such a big deal because you didn't have it all the time, and it felt like a high end type beverage when you were a kid because it was different than what you would get somewhere else. So you're like, oh my god, I've got Sunny D, this thing's so special. And maybe there was a placebo effect to it because I had some tonight. I was so excited about buying this. And the way that I sold it was, look, we're having this Christmas party for Elliot at his school, and we signed up to bring in beverages. And if the Christmas party is going to be at like 11 o'clock, not everybody's going to want to drink pop at that point in time. Not everybody is going to want to drink, sparkling water like me at that time. If they're eating breakfast or something while watching the Christmas pageant, then maybe they want something to go with that breakfast that's a little bit out of the ordinary. So that's how I sold it to Holly. I was like, that's why I bought the Sunny D, because it makes sense. It's logical for what people are going to be eating, and we signed up to be beverage people. And yes, I got pop, and yes, I got water, and yes, I got Capri Sun to bring all of that for the kids and for the parents. But like, maybe they don't want that stuff. Maybe they want something similar to orange juice, not orange juice, but similar to orange juice. So that's how I sold it. But in my own head, I was just really, really excited about buying it because it's been years since I've had Sunny D. And now I understand why it's been years since I've had Sunny D. Because my taste buds have been exposed to much better tasting things in this world, like San Pellegrino sparkling water, or Buble sparkling water, or vitamin water lemonade, or Coke Zero, or something like that. Because my sip of Sunny D was such a letdown tonight that now, like, now we have all of this Sunny D in the house because I bought extra, way more than I should have for this Christmas pageant. So now we have this Sunny D in the house that nobody is going to drink because I don't really want it because it doesn't taste the way that I remember it tasting.
I mean, it just don't hit the same. And I feel like I did that experiment actually exactly with Sunny D like a couple
Uh-huh.
years ago, which is funny that you say that. Because like you see it in a grocery store and like I wasn't crazy and got like where I don't have a kid and didn't have the excuse to get like 2 packs of it, but like I got like one and I was like, oh, let me see what this is hitting for, and it was I can agree with you. Like your taste buds definitely evolve, but you made me think of like the San Pellegrino Limon, like the soda or that because oh my god, again I'm gonna get berated in the comments. I'm not from here. I don't call it pop. I'm sorry, but no, like that makes me like I would house those San Pellegrino Limons. Like that was my
Yeah.
stick. Like I would be like, oh, this is like not soda technically, it's lemon. Like you can get away with this. Like I can have this for like an after school drink or whatever. Like oh my god, my parents used to hate how fast we would go through them, and it would come in a pack where you could have like I don't remember what the other flavor was because I didn't drink it, but
Yeah.
like it would be half limon and half the other flavor, and I simply would not touch the other flavor, so we would just have all of those laying around, and the limons would be gone. And I'm like, well, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not drinking the other ones, but uh, yeah, this. All right, I think that's a good place to end today's podcast. Wrap it up with some fun tidbits. Back to the childhood. Ooh, the thing that I saw today that I haven't tried in a
Yeah.
minute when Jalen Tyson was checking somebody out and they had Yoo-Hoo, and I was like,
Oh,
oh yeah,
you.
Yoo-Hoo is. I was like, hold on now, because it was either like they had Yoo-Hoo, but I remember like the old commercials that where they had like the little chocolate like packet where
Yep.
you could put it in the milk with the bunny on the cover
Yeah.
and stuff. Like that's what it reminded me of. Those two different brands. So that was like the first thing that came to mind, and when I saw the Yoo-Hoo, I was like, oh man, so somebody's gonna be happy. But they did a great job with the entire event. Obviously, Darius and Jalen being on the same grouping was hilarious because they are two kids in a candy store when it comes to being goofy and just interacting with the fan base. But
Man, I
all
can't
right,
remember the last
now I'm
time I
now I'm
had
done for
Yoo-Hoo.
real. I'm done on
I
talking
can't
about.
remember the last time I had Yoo-Hoo. Yoo-Hoo like always kind of sketched me out in a way. Um, because it was not in the dairy aisle. It was not in the cold foods aisle. So it was supposed to be, I mean, I can't say chocolate milk, but like a chocolatey drink like that. And it was just in a regular aisle with other warm foods on a shelf with like juice boxes and stuff. And it made me a little bit sketched out because Again, it was supposed to be somewhat ish similar to milk, but yet it wasn't in that same section. So, when's the last time you had Yoo-Hoo? Did you like Yoo-Hoo back in the day? Did you enjoy drinking it? Do you remember?
I'm I'm not a milk drinker. I'm I'm not a milk drinker. So I had a bad experience with
Mm.
milk in I think it was middle school where they had like the carton of milks and stuff that you
Yeah,
would
yeah,
drink,
yeah,
and I was just like not having it because I think throughout elementary school again I would be housing those things, cracking them open. I used to bargain with some of my friends back in the day trying to get extra milk, and then something happened. I don't remember what it was, but there was a day that just like turned me all the way off to
yeah.
milk
Wow.
in general, and I have like not gone back. So I think back in like middle
Wow.
school might be the last time I've had
Mm.
Yoo-Hoo, just because I don't play with like nothing lactate like that anymore.
It's just so funny to think about like the things from your childhood, um, and having the opportunity, if you did, to get them in a store again. And there was something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something from my childhood that I was looking around for. Like I was determined to find it. I went on Amazon, I went on Kroger's website, I went on all these different places like Publix in the South to see that I could get it delivered for me. And I can't remember what it was now. It wasn't Yoo-Hoo, it wasn't Sunny D. Oh, you know what it was? Clearly Canadian. Do you remember that?
Not no, you lost me. I don't know what that is. Clearly Canadians off for me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to ruin it. We were on a
We
good
were.
streak too.
I mean, it was like a sparkling beverage type thing, flavored cherry, blackberry, but it came in this like fancy glass, and it was probably, I don't know, $3 per, probably 16.9 fluid ounces, but it was in a glass thing, and like it made it feel so much fancier because it wasn't in a can and it wasn't in a bottle. But clearly Canadian was something that I was looking around for online recently, trying to get it delivered because I just remember drinking it as a kid and then not drinking it for 10, 15 years or something like that. And certain places carry it around here, but the odds of, the flavor that you want being in stock and stuff like that, it's kind of hit and miss at the local Giant Eagles and whatnot. But clearly Canadian was the one that I was looking for because I was craving it so much that I went on all these grocery store websites online to see if they would deliver it to me, like Publix. Like Publix in Tampa Bay would really make a
Man.
special order and send me a case of clearly I don't know what I was thinking, but sometimes when you're desperate, you just do dumb things.
So you literally have liked
Oh,
sparkling water your
yeah.
entire life.
Oh
That
yeah.
is like I couldn't imagine like taking my like even 10-year old to a restaurant and someone being like, hey, like this is kind of a fancier spot. You want sparkling or still water? And before the parents could answer, the kid goes,
Sparkling.
sparkling. Like I can just picture mini Chris Fedor at the dinner table ask because I just looked it up and like I remember
Oh,
these bottles, but like as people know, I don't drink sparkling water. I don't like bubbles in my water. I like still water. I'm cool with tap water, like as long as it's filtered
yeah.
nowadays. So like it's cool, but like sparkling water has never been my stitch.
Oh yeah. I would be the kid that would be like, oh yeah, give me the aquapana.
I think we lost you there for a second, but so before we lose you again, I think that is the way to wrap up today's episode when it comes to talking about our childhood favorites and stuff. I don't know if I really gave y'all my favorites, but I'm gonna save that for a different
Yeah.
day. We talk about favorite drinks and all those different things a different day. But before we lose Chris, because I know y'all want to keep hearing about his sparkling water
And my Sunny
and
D.
purchases at the grocery store. Yeah, 100%. But With that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Tomorrow is the day we will do another rendition of Hey Chris. So if you want to send in your questions and you want to ask anything that's on your mind, tomorrow's the day, and you might just want to do this to sign up for a 14-day free trial, or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.